Hi. Falling off my chair, shoot. I'm butchering all of this. Maybe I will crush my 23 and 23 in 24. John Cavendish and his and blah. When the book opens with someone's face being carved at the murder scene, you know you're in for something. I feel like I'm having a deja vu, and as soon as I utter that phrase, I feel like I've just jinxed myself. Best worst video ever. Let's get comfy. Things are pinging. Okay. Hi everybody, it's Audrey. Welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Welcome to what I read in the month of January, part 1. So, I have read a whole bunch of really good books this month. And I've done a couple rereads, and I have kicked off with so many 2024 releases that I'm super excited about. And I have just finished a book today, which I may or may not talk about in this video. I have to figure out what I want to read next. So, let's just dive on in to what I read this month, and I'm going to start with what's on the top of the pile, which is a reread for me, which is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So this is the collector's edition. She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. I bought this a couple of years ago. So I read Vicious 2020 maybe? 2019? I read it many years ago, and I loved it. And I did that thing where I immediately bought Vengeful, because I was like, I'm going to read both of these books and it's going to be absolutely amazing. And I never wound up reading Vengeful despite owning it. Just over there. And then it just didn't happen. And then I decided I wanted to reread Vicious before I read Vengeful, just to remind myself what all was going on. So if you guys have been around here, you know that this is definitely out of my wheelhouse. But I'm like, who did the audiobook of it? I loved this book. So the audiobook was read by Jeremy Arthur. So the thing about this is I physically read it the first time around and loved it. And I debated rereading it in the past, but there was no audiobook of it. So I had listened to an interview. I've listened to so many interviews with V.E. Schwab, but one in particular where she was saying how she was not happy with the original audiobook recording of this. So it wound up getting pulled. And it was during the pandemic and they wanted to re-record it, but obviously you couldn't basically do anything then. So there was a delay in getting it re-recorded, but then this popped up on my library and I got so excited, so I just snagged it. So this is, again, so out of my wheelhouse in the sense of the supernatural, fantastical elements of it, but this story and V.E. Schwab as a writer just grabbed me, and I loved everything about this book. No one is more surprised than me how much I loved this book the first time, and then loved it just as much the second time around. So we are following Victor and Eli. They start out as college roommates. They are scientists. They are interested in near-death experiences, in adrenaline rushes, in kind of living a bit on the edge. And they are interested in extraordinaries. And they have learned that if you have a near-death experience, you can come back with these extraordinary powers. So they do some experimenting in college, and it goes. It goes. And then we pick up with them in present day, which is 10 years later, like 10 years after the college days when things went. And Victor has escaped from prison, and he is trying to get revenge on Eli. And the opening line of this, kind of the quote from Joseph Brodsky, is, "Life, the way it really is a battle not between bad and good, but between bad and worse." So this is the epitome of the morally gray book, and who is on the right side of things, and who's killing for the right reasons, and who is protecting the right people, and who is harming the right people. Like, it's definitely some morally questionable things happening in here, and it's really well written. It's just page turning and compulsive, and there's so many fantastic characters in this book, and I just loved it. I loved it. So I plan to read, and as soon as I utter that phrase, I feel like I've just jinxed myself. I would like to read Vengeful in February, so stay tuned for that. And I'm going to physically read it. I just wanted to do the audiobook to refresh myself. But I was surprised how much I really did remember in detail which always makes me super excited because it's been a few years. So there you go. That's one I read. That was a reread. I'm going to do a new release next. So the next book I have is Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody. So I actually had an e-arc of this, and then surprise, surprise, on Pub Day, Abby, thank you again so much, sent me a copy of this. And totally not expecting it. So it's always one of those things when like the Amazon box is there and you're like, what did I buy? And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. So this was definitely a highly anticipated one of mine. And I will admit, I was not at all prepared for how dark this book is. So we have true crime vibes to it. Our main character's name is Teddy. So Theodora, 20 years ago, her older sister Angie disappeared. So she snuck out to go to a party that night. She was in high school and she was never seen again. And the police very quickly ruled her a runaway based on her history, based on her partying ways, you know, based on the way she dressed and the way she looked. And Teddy and her parents never got past it. And Angie's disappearance understandably wrecked them as a family. So the book opens on the 20th anniversary of Angie's disappearance, and Teddy's father drives off a bridge into the water, leaving her and her mom to sort of once again pick up the pieces of tragedy. And as Teddy is trying to go through her dad's things and sort through things and help her mom at the house, she stumbles upon the fact that for the past 20 years, her dad has been looking into Angie's disappearance, and he has been engaging with people online. He has been on true crime boards. He has been on like Reddit threads, and he's trying to find Angie. So Teddy decides to pick up where her father left off and kind of finish the work he started. And she's going to try and find out what happened to Angie. So Teddy winds up meeting another true crime fanatic, I guess I would say. Teddy's not a fanatic about Angie's case because Angie is her sister. The person she meets online is definitely fanatical about Angie's case. And it becomes one of these things where like, this could save her or this could destroy her. It is such a gut-wrenching look at grief. Teddy makes so many choices. There's so many parts of this that are hard to read. Kate Brody holds nothing back. She goes all in on everything in this book. It's kind of bleak. It's kind of painful. There's definitely some more moments to it, but it really is like, I feel like a curtain pulled back, raw, honest, just like I said, painful look at what grief can do and sort of what an obsession of going down the rabbit hole can do to a person. And even when you have people around you, even when you have support around you, like it really is Teddy's descent into grief. And it's a powerful book. It's really well written. The characters are really well done. And you just can't, or at least I couldn't help, but just want to like crawl through the pages and hold Teddy and just like tell her it was going to be okay. But like, wow, just what a, I'm stunned by, not because I'm like, I can't believe somebody wrote a book like this, but this, I was expecting lighter fare in some ways. Not that I thought it was going to be funny. I didn't expect it to be as dark as it was, but really like, I'm still thinking about it. It's like one of those kinds of books. And I just thought it was fantastically well done. So thank you again, Abby. And I'm just, yeah, I'm really excited I read it. This is one of the first books I read this year, and it was really, really good. Let's go for a little bit of levity into the actual first book I read this year, and that was The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. So let me grab my phone because I actually had the audio arc of this, and I had pre-ordered. I actually was listening to the arc of this, and then I was like, how have I not ordered this book yet? And then I wound up pre-ordering it, even though I had read it by that point. I loved this. I'm a huge Rachel Hawkins fan. I feel like you guys know that if you've been around here. I also have some hair tickling my face. I can't wait to get a haircut. Best worst video ever. All right, let me find the book. Hold on.
And if she died before
Not me pressing.
me, then it was Howell's. Cruel, stupid Howell, who had Daddy's eyes and
Oh my gosh, how do I get to who read it?
Nell's pinched mouth. Howell, a real McTavish. It irked me, darling.
How do I not know how to listen to... Oh my gosh, hold on. This is such a disaster. Ruby. Ruby, Ruby, Ruby. Okay, and we're back. This was read by Dan Bittner, Eliza Foss, John Pirhalla, and Patti Murin. So, shocker, multiple POVs, multiple audiobook readers. And we are following past and present timelines. The past timeline is told through letters from our main character, one of our main characters, Ruby. So Ruby McTavish, Callahan Woodward, Miller Kenmore dies. And she's not only North Carolina's richest woman, she's also one of its most notorious. So in the aftermath of her death, her adopted son Camden inherits everything. But Camden doesn't want to have anything to do with Ruby or her legacy or any of it. And the balance of the surviving McTavish family are kind of ticked that they all got cut out of the will. So Cam has left. He has moved to Colorado. He's just trying to live a quiet, simple life away from all of this. And he is married and just all is fine. So gothic Southern thriller. He gets a call. Somebody else in the family has died and he has to make the reluctant return home. So this time he has Jules by his side. He just wants to go take care of business and like keep on going. But Jules is kind of like, you've got all this and like, you need to deal with it, my friend. You need to deal with it. So we get POVs from Jules and Camden, and then we get letters from Ruby hearing about her life. So notorious, she's been married 4 times. Her first claim to fame, I would say, when she was a very young child, she was kidnapped, eventually returned, but she has been sort of a media spotlight person her entire life. So kind of Evelyn Hugo, totally not Evelyn Hugo. But while reading about this, even though Ruby's not an actress, sort of the infamy and fascination around her reminded me of Evelyn, and maybe it's because you can see she's got the green dress on. It also was getting Evelyn Hugo vibes. But I have read all 4. So Rachel Hawkins used to write YA books. I have read the 4 adult books. So I read The Wife Upstairs, Reckless Girls, The Villa, which came out last year, and then I read her 2 Aaron Sterling books, The X-Hex, and I can't think of the name of the second X-Hex book, but there's a 3rd one coming. That's 3. But I'm a huge fan of hers. So I very much enjoy her thrillers. They are quick, they are sharp, she has great characters, she does great darkness in her characters, despicable things, funny things, just really whip smart characters. And I love, again, she's not someone who holds back in a totally different way than Rabbit Hole. It's a no holds back, or like no holding back. But there were some moments with these characters where I definitely was laughing and having such a good time with it. And I feel like you can tell that Rachel Hawkins has a fun time when she's writing her books. She loves writing her thrillers. She loves getting in with these characters, these deliciously rich people behaving badly. And so much of what comes into question here, you know, you get sort of these family ties, and it's, you know, Camden being adopted when she was older and him being the legacy of the family and sort of like the heir to the fortune and who is the heiress, and now Jules as his wife, and he's sort of the king of the castle in so many ways, and she has every right to be there, and just all this delicious backstabbing, and you know what's real and what's the myth and what's the truth of the story. But if you're looking for just, I feel like, fantastic bingeable thrillers with some definitely like dark twistiness and a lot of 4-letter words and just not for like exploitive purposes, but just like it suits the characters so well. I don't know. I just feel like she has such great fun with her books. She also does like news stories interwoven. I really like her style of storytelling, and I have watched a couple interviews with her about this. She did one with Stacey Willingham, which I saw and enjoyed, and then she was at the Poison Pen. But she talked about how, like, originally Ruby's chapters were in flashback and they weren't letters, and how we weren't really getting her voice and getting to know Ruby, so she wound up changing it along the way. Like, I love those little insights to stories, but I loved it. I binged the heck out of this book, and I'm definitely in the mood to reread her books. And then she said in the Poison Pen interview that there are Easter eggs. So something from Reckless Girls shows up in the villa in a blink or you miss it kind of a thing. And something from the villa isn't here. And she's like, if you know, you know, but she didn't tell us what it was because she wants you to find it. But I'm like, what is it? And I'm sure it's super subtle because that's the whole point of the Easter egg. I want to know what they are. I want to go back and read them because I read the villa and then I read Reckless Girls. So obviously I wouldn't have picked up on it. I guess maybe if I was smart, I would have. I didn't know to look for it in her books. Now I know. So anyway, but let's transition to Stacey Willingham since I just mentioned her. So I also had the e-arc of, I was going to say the name of her old book, of Only If You're Lucky. And then I had pre-ordered this. So here she is. Beautiful. This is the year of the beautiful cover again. So I have read now all 3 of Stacey Willingham's books. I love her so much too. She definitely took a little bit of a turn in this book because we are following 4 college students in this one, which is different from Flicker in the Dark and All the Dangerous Things, which followed 2 adult protagonists. So to me, this didn't read young, but I had thought originally that we were going to get like a dual timeline in this when they were older, but it follows them consistently kind of through summer before sophomore year through their sophomore year. And it's murdery and it's dark female friendships. And again, it's secrets and lies and who can you trust. And it's dark. I feel like she took a step darker in this one than her past 2 books, which were also dark. And I also kind of want to reread A Flicker in the Dark because I love that book so much. But in this one, we are following a girl named Margot. So right before she came to college, her best friend, Eliza, died in a terrible accident / was it an accident? And she has just had a very hard time letting her walls down, letting people in. She was very closed off her freshman year. And at the end of freshman year, she is approached by this girl, Lucy Sharp, who is that girl. She is cool. She is effortless. She is one of those people who like everybody kind of like falls under her spell. And Lucy stops by her room, so they live in the same dorm, and invites her to come live with Lucy and 2 of her other friends in this off-campus house for the summer and for next year. And Margot doesn't want to go home. She doesn't want to go relive memories of her old best friend. And she realizes that this is her chance to kind of break out and flip the script and just do something completely unexpected. And she goes for it. So we follow them that summer. And it's really like this great female connection, these women becoming friends, that time in your life. And I just think back to college. So the summer after my sophomore year, me and 3 of my friends wound up getting an apartment off campus. It was like the first time of like real freedom. I didn't come home. It was like such a big deal. I felt like such an adult, which like in hindsight, like I was 18 turning 19, so far from being an adult, but just sort of all the freedoms and feelings that you get from that. So I feel like I really connected with that on some level. So we're seeing them have this like magnetic summer. But what we know at the beginning of the book is that somebody is dead, Lucy is missing, and the police have turned to Margot and her other 2 roommates for answers. And then we go backwards in time to try and figure out what happened and piece everything together. And the other hitch added bonus to this is the house that they're living in is sort of this extra overflow house owned by the fraternity next door. So when they have big pledge classes and they have a lot of brothers, they use it and people live there. But when they don't need it, they rent it out for cheap. And what's very fun is that was actually Stacey Willingham's experience in college. So she's like, all the things about the house are true. All the things about the murder didn't happen when I was in college. But reading this and you're like, that would never happen. That's so crazy. Who would ever live like that? Because it's, of course, it's like, I mean, it's like a frat boy annex. So you can imagine what this house was like that they lived in. And you're like, how could anybody do that? But like her and her friends absolutely did that. So it's really, really well done. And I just had a great time with it. I loved hearing Stacey Willingham talk about it, I'm not going to talk about like her little Easter eggs and stuff because she revealed some things which aren't plot spoilers, but I feel like discover the book on your own. And I just thought it was great. So I loved it. I loved the ending. I was super satisfied with this book. I really enjoyed these characters. Like I said, there was definitely a relatability to that feeling of these friends. Again, my college experience did not include murder, but the four friends living alone for the first time. And even this, like it's set like in the summer and it's hot, you know, and like you're just looking for a place where there's air conditioning and a place where you can cool off, and they're partying with the boys next door. It was just so reminiscent of that summer that I had that I loved it so much. So huge fan of hers, huge fan of this book. Highly recommend it. Okay, the next reread I have is, I'm looking who read the audiobook because I listened to the audiobook, is The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. So this was read by Charles Armstrong. I read this book, I don't know, a few years ago. So I am doing the Read with Agatha challenge this year. So it's a book a month. And they lay out 12 books for you to read. And it definitely is like if you've already read a book, and there's like guidelines around it. It's sort of like a by the decades kind of a thing. So they selected 12 books, but if you have read one of the books, you can opt to read something different. Like obviously you can do whatever you want to do. But I had not read this in a while and I thought, well, let me reread it. This is her first book. This is our introduction to Poirot. Let me reread this. And then I think I'm going to read a different book also just for funsies. I don't know. So this is the first Agatha Christie book. And also kind of like with Vicious, I'm surprised how much detail I remembered from this, and things that as I was listening to it, I was like, oh, that's a clue, or oh, that's not real. Like Poirot's going to figure that part out. So I didn't remember every little detail, but I definitely remembered some stuff. So in this one, we have a wealthy woman is poisoned at an English country manor, and the world of detective fiction has changed forever. Obviously, that's not the synopsis of the book. So this is our introduction to Captain Arthur Hastings as well. So he is running into his old friend John Cavendish when the book opens, and he's invited to the family estate at Styles. And it says he has a premonition of approaching evil. So outside, the Great War is still raging and England is in upheaval. Cavendish's widowed stepmother has brought the turmoil home by marrying a sinister-looking younger man. So then she winds up getting killed and everybody's a suspect. So typical, I would say, manor house mystery. There's a whole bunch of people who are staying there. We have some staff, we have suspects. And as fate would have it, Captain Hastings runs into this funny little Belgian man that he used to know who happens to be around with some other of his Belgian friends. And Hastings invites him to come try and solve the case. So we get Poirot doing his thing. And it's just a really good book. It's just a really, really good book. And I don't know, I just love being in her stories. So I have told you, I believe, that I've been listening to the All About Agatha podcast quite a bit in probably the last 5 or 6 months, I would say. So I've listened to a lot of back episodes. I've only listened to the episodes on the books that I have read. They do a deep dive, but there have been special episodes with Alex Michaelides, with Sophie Hannah, like with other Agatha Christie fans. And I've just gotten more excited about her book, and I feel like I have more of a desire to read classic mystery fiction, because I think very much, and I feel like I'm having a deja vu, after I read Rebecca, to see how so many stories echo parts of that book or the core of that book or little Rebecca elements, which like if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. And like you're not necessarily missing something. But the more Agatha Christie's I read and get familiar with, to see her inspiration in current books, and Alex Michaelides in particular will talk about his love of her. But anyway, I'm having a strong desire to read classic fiction and classic mystery fiction, I should say. So I started at the beginning, and I'll keep you guys posted kind of month to month on how I'm doing. If you're interested, obviously I'm going to do it here, but I do think I'm going to pick up another book from the 20s. I'm just not sure which one yet. So stay tuned, but I enjoyed that. And then the last book I'm going to talk about in this video is The Tenant by Katrine Engberg. So this was on my 23 and 23, After I had filmed that epic fail video about not reading, I don't know, 70% of the books that I talked about, I was like, I really want to read one of these. So I can't explain why this is the one that stood out to me, but it is. It's the first in a series. I feel like I also was like, let me see if I'm like really down with this series, because for one, I own the next 2 books in it. And every time I see the 4th book on a book website, it's on my, I have 2 Amazon wish lists. Like I have my public one, which changes all the time because I will definitely get a little lukewarm on a book maybe, or maybe it's something I've read and then I don't feel like I need to own it anymore, or maybe it's something I'm like super excited about. But I have a private list, which has books and other things on it. So the 4th book in this series is on my private list because I'm like, I want it there. Not that I'll ever forget about it, but I'm always looking at it and I'm like, I should probably read the 1st book to see if I enjoy it. So I did the audiobook of this one as well. So let me tell you who let me tell you who read this one. The narration was fantastic. I feel like it definitely made the experience for me. And I'm just trying to talk while I scroll on my phone. This was read by Graeme Malcolm. So fantastic job, I would say. And this is the first in a detective series. So the premise of this is the book opens to a very brutal murder, and this woman is found brutally murdered in her apartment. This takes place in Copenhagen, and her face is carved very intricately. So I'm like, all right, okay, we can do this. So the detectives are on the case, and it is a building that has 3 apartments in it. And in the blurb, which I feel like I don't even want to say it now, even though I've said it on here a whole bunch of times, there's something that's revealed in the blurb that does not get revealed for a while in the book. So there was a part of me that was waiting for it, and it just took a bit to get there. So it took me a little bit to get into the book. So I have not read a Nordic noir in a little bit. It definitely has a different pace and feel to an American detective series. And not that one is better than the other, but I like had to be reminded of the pace being a little bit different, I would say. So in this one, we are following Detective Jeppe Kerner and Annette Werner. So it's like Kerner and Warner, which is like part of the shtick in this book. So there's actually quite a bit of good humor in this book, and these characters are a bit quirky, and we're getting a lot of personal life rather than straight up police investigation. So we are 1000% getting police investigation. This suits the Nordic noir vibe completely in terms of darkness, in terms of some brutality. There's a lot of characters in this book. There's a lot of suspects in here. It is definitely hardcore investigative, but it feels, I guess because we're getting a couple POVs. So there's another character, the landlady, who is the landlady in the house. Julia is the girl who got killed. And we are getting Julia's point of view. So it's like her personal life, because she's not really investigating per se. And then our main character, Jeppe, we're getting his personal life as well. So it feels like half of the book maybe is personal and half of it is police investigation, which again, not better or worse, just a different vibe to it maybe than if you're reading a different book. I don't know. That's probably not helpful. I will say the more I got into it, the more like it picked up, and we were getting more suspects, more things were happening, more red herrings, more dead ends, more good suspects. Like they were on the case for things, more theories. So I definitely enjoyed it. It just took me a bit, I feel like, to catch pace with her writing style, but the narration, the audiobook narration definitely helped a lot. And I ultimately enjoyed it. I have heard that this book was in no way not good, but I've heard it gets better. So in some ways I feel like we kind of needed to establish our characters. So we're obviously meeting them like in the middle of their partnership. It's not like they're just new to each other. It's like we're meeting them in the middle of the movie, but we're just getting to know them, if that makes any kind of sense. But there's definitely some quirkiness to it, but it is not afraid of going to the dark and messed up places. So I was surprised by which I shouldn't be, but I was surprised by some of the darkness that was involved in this book. But yeah, you just some real dark and messed up people doing some pretty horrendous things. When the book opens with someone's face being carved at the murder scene, you know you're in for something. So it definitely met my Nordic noir expectations, I would say. And I'm very happy that I read it. So I will keep you guys posted as I move into the series. Off the top of my head, don't even ask me what the second book of the series is. I'll put it down below. I know The Harbor. I think The Harbor is book 3. I'm getting them mixed up in my head, but I would recommend it. If you enjoy Nordic noir, if you enjoy police investigation, I would definitely recommend it. It's very atmospheric. I don't know that I've ever read a book set in Copenhagen before, to be honest. So I definitely enjoyed the setting of it. And there's a lot of Julia, who is our main character, like she was involved in the arts. Her boyfriend was in a band. So you do get a lot of like arts and theater and an artist culture to this, photography, writing, all of that. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And Jeppe, of course, is, I shouldn't say of course is, but he is surprising on what his knowledge is and what his background is and what his history is. So there's a lot going on in here in a good way. I definitely enjoyed it. And I didn't find it too hard to follow with all the characters, but one of my favorite things about listening to a translated book is there is no way I ever would have gotten any of the pronunciations right in any of this. So it definitely helped. I can get very taken out of a book if I'm looking at words and phrases that I can't, and like names that I can't see or hear on my own, and that distracts me. So in that way, the audiobook really leaned in for me, and I very much enjoyed it. So there you go. We're going to end on the high note of The Tenant, which was a good book, and I'm very glad I read it. And we'll see. Maybe I will crush my 23 and 23 in 24. We'll see what happens, but that's going to do it for the first round. So I did just finish First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. I'm going to talk about it in the next one because, for one, I'm still processing how much I loved that book, and I could not coherently talk about it today. But I don't know what I'm going to pick up next, so come back for part 2. When I film that, it's going to be more than just the Ashley Elston book. I've read other stuff already, and we're going to talk about those. So let me know. What are you guys reading? What was your first book of the year? I'm always trying to think of like an engaging question at the end, if anybody's even made it this far. What was the first book you finished this year? Tell me that. Tell me that. Or tell me whatever you want to tell me, because you know how this works. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, everybody. Again, with the noises. I don't know. I don't want that to be a thing. All right, bye.